Your translators, yes? I wanted to ask you something, but because in the film High Tech Low Life, you say something that is very surprising to a lot of people. We've heard about the worries of Yoani. For her, that's an important motivation to write about all the things she sees. When you were asked about your motivation to write and to blog, you say, I want to be famous. Is that still true now?
Sure. I want to be famous, this is true, because if I be famous, I can do a lot of things easier than other people, even okay.
So, for you, the fame is a means to be able to do things that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do? Is being famous also making sure that you are in safety?
In China, maybe sometimes famous not get more safety because the government authority worry about your influence. Maybe you can mobilize people doing some revolution, something like that. But so I always. I always behave myself, so I not behave anybody, even they are follow my blog, follow my report. So I just behave myself, so I have no influence to give my nation, country damage.
And just to be sure, you don't live in China anymore, do you?
I am married with a Taiwanese girl, but I'm still using China passport, so I am free go back to China.
And Taiwan?
Yes.
You travel between the two of them?
Legally.
And legally, that's good. Another question I have for you is, in the film, you meet your elderly colleague, let's call him this, Tiger Temple, and you two talk about the differences between the two generations. And you say that he cares about the community, but you care much more about the individual. He calls you a good-natured warrior. What do you think about this? How do you think he's right?
She's right.
Yeah? You are a warrior?
I am one man, one gun warrior. Is one man show.
And he's another kind of warrior.
Maybe she defines she's a warrior, but I'm not defined. I am warrior. Yeah.
Okay. Patrick, I wanted to ask you something because in your biography I read that you've been arrested twice under the Official Secret Act. Could you elaborate on that? What happened?
Well, clearly, obviously I live a life of crime, but no, more seriously, before I made documentaries, I was an investigative journalist on a relatively left-wing magazine in England, and we used to, in the time of a Conservative government, we used to expose government secrets. And Mrs. Thatcher, who was the then Prime Minister of England, wasn't very keen on people who revealed secrets. So, and it was at the time that also freedom of speech was it was the last time that it was a really live issue, I think around the globe. And journalists, particularly then, were pushing back at what the state considered a secret. And so one of the things we revealed was that Britain had just put a spy satellite up over Russia, that had the Cold War, and hadn't quite got around to telling Parliament about it. And the state, I can actually remember the time we interviewed the guy who's in charge of government science, and he said, "So tell me about Skynet." And his jaw just fell open. He went, that was out. Anyway, the net result of it being out was that night my house was raided, so was my office was raided, BBC's offices were raided, everyone who worked on the stories was raided, and we were all arrested under the efficiency. And what was interesting about it, which is rather heartening for everyone who believes in freedom of information, was there was then a sort of groundswell, slightly unlikely groundswell, because journalists aren't that popular, of opinion in our favour. And there was a debate in Parliament at which the Conservative government, despite having a majority, was humbled. And so, almost overnight, we were very luckily reprieved and the charges were dropped. So,
That made you a warrior too.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
We'll come to that later. So, in this part I want to talk about the role of individuals defending the freedom of information, but also what are their boundaries? What makes them maybe not want to fight for freedom of information? So, we prepared some statements, and I want to begin with the first. So, it says, the most important obstacle in the fight for fair access to information are family, friends, or colleagues. Zola, maybe we can start with you again. In the film, we see your mother asking you not to fight your fight because she says you have to live a normal life with a wife and a normal house and a car. Was it for you a reason to maybe consider stop fighting your fight? You know the movie Lost in Translation? That's how I feel now. In the movie, your mother asks you to stop doing what you are doing because she wants you to live a regular life. Was that for you a reason to maybe stop?
I'm not a warrior.
You're not a warrior.
Yeah, because sometimes I have enjoyed my normal life with my new wife.
Okay.
Oh, I have only one wife.
And Yoani, you too. You have a family. You have a husband and a son you care a lot about. What do they think about you being so out in the open and taking all these risks?
Sí, en realidad mi familia nunca ha sido un freno, más bien han sido mis alas, o sea, me han motivado mucho a hacer lo que hago.
My family has never been an obstacle in this. Instead, it gives me wings to do what I have to do.
Sin embargo, me preocupa mucho mi familia, ¿no? Tengo un hijo de 18 años, Teo, se llama Teo, y la última vez que estuve detenida, la oficial de la policía que me interrogaba me dijo: tu hijo monta bicicletas, es muy joven, que tenga cuidado, puede tener un accidente.
However, I'm very worried about my family. I have a son, he's 18 years old, he's called Teo. And the last time when I was taken by the police, the policewoman asked me, does your son ride a bicycle? Yes, said Yoani. And then she said, you have to be careful, maybe he's going to have an accident.
That is very clear. I just want to go to Farna Saifi, who is here in the front, because if you've seen Forbidden Voices, you've seen Farnas as well. She is Iranian, lived in Holland for a bit, and is now living in Germany. Farnas, you have left your family now for good. So this means that your personal sacrifice is huge. How do you still keep in contact? Do you have any signs? Or do you hear from them regularly? Yes, I still have contact with my family. I still learn about them regularly. Without that, life would be so much harder. If you had known this in advance, would you have made the same choice?
Honestly, I don't know, because when I started to blog at the beginning, I never thought my blog could be a threat to anyone, and I could suffer something like getting arrested, interrogation, banned from working, from continuing education, and in a way self-imposed exile. But the important thing is that I don't envy. I still feel it works.
You're doing a very important job. I want to go to another part, and that's the role of companies in freedom of expression. Because nowadays, as we all know, when we express ourselves, a lot of it is done on the internet. So not only do we have media companies not having a big role in this discussion, but tech companies as well. Marietje, can I ask you to react to the following statement? Oh, and by the way, this is a quote from Julian Assange. The internet, our most important tool of emancipation, has transformed into the most dangerous catalyst for totalitarianism of all times. Do you agree?
Yes, because I think both aspects of what he's saying is true, and I think we've been able to see that in the movies that you've been watching here at this festival, in the stories of bloggers, human rights defenders, activists that are here that have on the one hand been able to use the internet, new technologies to freely express themselves, to make us eyewitness to their courage, but also the suffering and the price of free expression. New technologies have helped press freedom take on a very different form. Access to information has been possible despite state-imposed censorship. And so I think there is a number of very, very exciting opportunities that new technologies bring. But on the other hand, of course, mass censorship, mass surveillance, specific tracking and tracing of individuals is also enabled by technologies. And so I believe it's the role of governments to ensure that there is a tap on what companies can do, and that it's not just a market of unlimited developments towards censoring, surveying, and accessing people's information that puts people in danger. And I believe that governments, especially here in Europe, are not necessarily tuned in sufficiently to the impact that technologies can have, and that we should do a lot more to tilt the balance towards the positive impact and the advancement of human rights and fundamental freedoms that technologies can indeed have.
Can you give us an example of the sort of technologies that you encounter in your work and how they are used?
Well, what I encounter in my work is more through my conversations with human rights defenders and activists from countries ranging from Tunisia to Syria, Iran to China, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, and they all share different stories, different accounts of how their conversations, even though they were private and secured with passwords, were compromised. We know of mass surveillance technologies that are sold without regulation, without restriction. And sadly, a number of these kinds of technologies have a label made in Europe. And I believe that there is a huge paradox between our official policies that advance human rights. We want to force or stimulate countries to abide by the rule of law, to at least respect people's well-being, not to torture them, not to execute them, to allow them to freely express. But at the same time, there is a grey market, an intransparent market, an unregulated market of technologies that are made right here in Europe and that are sold to the highest bidder, often states that do not respect human rights or their agencies. And I think we have to begin by getting transparency into how big this market is, what kind of technologies are being made and sold to whom, and on the basis of that, make sure that we restrict the way in which European-made technologies are used as digital weapons, because I believe that the impact can be so severe of some of these technological systems that we have to start treating them with much more accountability.
And if you say they're made in Europe, they've got that tag, made in Europe, do we know these companies? Do we know the directors? Can we, do we see them in the newspapers?
Well, I think some of them we know. Some of these technologies, for example, monitoring capacity is tied to telecom networks, for example, or has been in the past. We know cases where, for example, Nokia Siemens Networks, European, Finnish, German cooperation, sold monitoring capacity to Iran. And this was completely within the law, but it did allow the Iranian authorities to access communications with harmful impact. We know of a number of companies that have been exposed, but mostly by investigative journalists. And I think that nobody can claim to have a full assessment of this market. And I believe that this is precisely the problem. I mean, my political party here in the Netherlands asked questions to the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, who took a lot of pride in saying that he was defending internet freedom and that our country should be a leader. But when I asked, Minister, can you guarantee that there are no technologies exported from the Netherlands that are hurting people's human rights? The answer was no. Because we simply lack the rules and regulations that force transparency and accountability, let alone rules that begin to cleverly make sure that there's no unlimited exports to countries where we know that technologies will be used against people's safety or well-being. And I think that it's a big gap that we need to fill as soon as we can.
So we need the investigative journalists. Hey, Patrick, you're sitting here. So in your film, Assange says about this journalist. Oh no, let me rephrase that. He says about the media companies, the media elite, that it's so much interwoven with the power structures globally, with governments, that the media, well, aren't as critical as they should be. Do you think that's true?
I think like lots of what Julian says, I think it's sort of half true and half sort of grinding on his student statements. You think, and this came as a big surprise to you, Julian, that it's a company that makes money. In both instances, the New York Times and Guardian are what they are. They are private companies. So, I mean, my immediate feeling about it was, yeah, surprised. But do I think that they therefore sold him down the river because they were beholden to a greater force than just their shareholders? No, I absolutely do not. And I think that's nonsense. And unfortunately, it's the sort of thing that Julian shouldn't say. Yeah, sure, they are big. Liberal.
So that's specific about his case.
Yeah.
And in general, if we take Julian Assange out of the picture, what?
If I take Julian Assange out of the picture, what do I think? Well, I think that newspapers tend to reflect. I think they do reflect the powers that shape society. Surprise, there are left-wing ones, there are right-wing ones. They're going to trim their medium according to what their political outlook is. So yes, in that sense, he's right. But I think he's actually only stating bleeding obvious, to use a technical phrase. So, but do I think they're...
So if we need the investigative journalism that Marietje is talking about, we need them to come from other
absolutely.
Media outlets.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's tragic that liberal papers can't afford journalism anymore. And if it's going to happen, it's going to be great people like these people around here, who I suspect be the forces that shape the rest of journalism. Much more than traditional backgrounds like that. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one sentence for clarification. At the moment, we rely mostly on journalism to expose the kinds of technologies that are being exported, but I think governments should take their responsibility and assess this market. So I don't think it is enough for us to rely on investigative journalism, although I appreciate their work as well as the work of a number of civil society organizations who've worked very hard to actually trace imprisoned and tortured activists all the way back to the technologies that were used and made in Europe to get them to prison. So I think we need to do more, and we cannot merely rely on journalists to hold these companies to account. The government should play their role and basically update rules and regulations that we have to ensure transparency and accountability and to curb export where needed.
And Yvette, do you think NGOs have a role in that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us at Witness, we started out 20 years ago with the idea of what if every human rights defender had a camera in their hands, what could they film and what could they change? Now, obviously, people are filming, millions of people with cameras in their hands. All of you, I'm sure, this room
are
has
filming you right now.
many cameras here, are documenting the world around us. So we're all participants in this process. And if human rights abuse happens, if police brutality, maybe right here outside, you can film it and you become a participant in the process. And I was quite struck by what Farnas was saying, is that when she started out blogging, she didn't realize she had become a human rights defender. And so what we do a lot is we work with lots of people like her. There's actually, I don't know if I'm going to show slides, but there's one slide that we had of the Iranian government, who, when people started filming and demonstrating in 2009 after the elections, that the Iranian government got all that footage out of YouTube and created their own website and started crowdsourcing people's identities. Now, if you're just a student who is participating in what you think is in a nice democratic process, you're not up against this kind of sort of evil, so to speak. So I think we all need to be much better equipped with the tools and the knowledge and the transparency. If Google stops her blog, censors it, then Google, a private company, has become the new arbiter of free speech. So,
and that's why I want to ask Zola and Yoani. You are using Twitter and maybe Facebook as well as a means to get your message out. Here we've been looking at those companies with a lot of distrust because we think that they might not respect our privacy and our freedom of information. How do you regard these companies? John, can we start with you?
Bueno, escuchando a los otros tres panelistas, a mí me da la impresión de que me estoy asomando a las discusiones que tendremos en Cuba en 20 años.
I have the feeling that when I listen to all the panelists, I have the idea that this kind of conversation we're going to get them within 20 years in Cuba.
Porque el problema ahora en Cuba no es si las grandes empresas utilizan nuestros datos privados, si Google se hace dueño de parte de nuestra vida virtual. Esos no son los dilemas del cubano actual.
The fact that Google is going to appropriate our private life is not a problem which Cubans are busy.
El problema principal de los cubanos es que no podemos físicamente entrar a Internet. Tenemos solamente un 3% de la población que tiene conectividad esporádica.
The problem is that we cannot get real access to Internet. Just 3% of the population have access, and that's not totally complete.
Y aunque la visibilidad nos mete en problemas, porque el gobierno utiliza los videos de YouTube, las fotos, los blogs, para satanizarnos, pero sin embargo la visibilidad como protección está funcionando más que la visibilidad como riesgo.
Although the fact that you are seen in Internet and then you can be followed, on the other side, this recognition of people can also be good for protecting them.
Nuestro gobierno se está haciendo con mucha tecnología proveniente de China para censurar, controlar, supervisar, e incluso los ciudadanos cubanos estamos vigilados, controlados, monitoreados sin acceder a Internet, nuestra vida física y real.
The Cuban government is getting much technology from China to follow the Cuban people, and they are daily followed and controlled in reality.
And just to be clear, because in the film it's shown that the blog posts of Yoani are not only getting access to through the internet, but also because people are using USB sticks and giving them around, and this makes their text go throughout the whole island. So when she says only 3% have access to the internet, that doesn't mean that all those people don't read her blog, because there are other ways of to read.
Una pequeña. Hoy mi blog está hackeado. Hoy, mientras estoy en este debate, mi blog está hackeado. Y es muy probable que sea por los soldados tecnológicos que fomenta, organiza y paga el gobierno cubano.
My blog is today, right now, is hacked, and I'm totally sure that it is due to cyber soldiers that the government paid.
Okay, so there's another film to be made in a few months, I guess. Zola, I want to get to you because the relationships, well, the relation between the Chinese government and Chinese companies, like Weibo, did I say that correctly? Do you use Weibo more than Twitter?
No, I use Twitter more than Weibo.
Okay. And do you sometimes, well, do you trust Twitter completely?
Of course, I trust Twitter and Google and American hosting because Chinese government cannot give pressure to foreign country. So Chinese government blocked lots of social networks, for example, Twitter, Facebook, news, maybe a lot of social networks.
And now you even give workshops to teach others to use Twitter and other social
Yes,
media.
I do some training to my friends, teach them how to bypass GFW. GFW is a censorship system in China. And also my blog was blocked. Then after I do some social issue reporting. So,
And is it still blocked?
it's still blocked.
And how do you get your message across now?
A lot of people using VPN or something like that, and the important is a lot of people using Google Readers subscribe on my blog. So this year, Google said will be shut down Google Reader. There are a lot of people in China and in Iran protest because this is very important tool.
Does everybody know what Google Reader is? No, so it's an RSS reader, so it allows you to follow blogs. And Google starts new functionalities once every few months, I guess. And they decided for some reason that they're going to stop Google Reader this year. So for a lot of people who've been using this functionality, it means that they have to look for alternatives, but it's not clear which ones are just as good as that one was. I want to go now to the role of governments because, well, that's what we've been talking about it through the other roles as well, of course. Marietje, can I start with you again? So, the following statement: a certain measure of censorship is necessary for the preservation of democratic stability. That's a tricky one, I guess.
Well, in principle, I would say no. I think that the most resilient, open societies benefit from an open debate with as few restrictions as possible. And so restriction is one thing, but censorship is often outside of the context of a clear, definition of why some information may not be available and why the government may seek to take that out of the public realm. And so I'm very, very critical of censorship.
And what restrictions do you think are allowed?
As little as possible. I mean, there are some existing rules also in this society where certain books are not allowed, or where you are not allowed to screen fire in a crowded theater like we are here, right? And so apparently those are considered in the public interest, but I would say that even the banning of certain books we should reconsider. And I think that, again, as much free speech as possible benefits an open society and a resilient debate, or a resilient society and an open debate where diverse voices can actually challenge each other's ideas without a restriction beforehand. And so I think it suits an open society to be as free as possible without censorship.
Playing devil's advocate again. Nowadays, when somebody screams, maybe there is a fire, a lot of people will scream fire just after that. So it's going so much faster, and the quantities are so much bigger does that have any impact on your opinion? I mean,
well, I think the checks and balances come from society itself as well. Let me give you a concrete example of somebody who said that there was a fire. It was Hillary Clinton who was using an anecdote in a campaign where she said, you know, it was 1995 and my husband and I landed in Bosnia and bullets were flying and, you know, it was extremely difficult and this is where I learned how to deal with the most challenging circumstances. And within minutes, people had found footage of that specific landing in that specific year, and there were no bullets flying around at all. And so the story of we were under fire in this case was immediately challenged with the facts. And so I think that this checks and balances, the countering of extremist narratives, the countering of frames that are not reflecting the reality, or the challenging of somebody's claims, the challenging of somebody's ideas, whether they be in the government, in the media, in a corporation, also comes from society itself. And so the empowerment of individuals to actually shine light on an issue from a different angle, to bring new facts into the discussion, I think is extremely exciting and will make it more and more difficult to control speech. However, and I just want to come back to what Yoani said about these, the sort of soldiers or the army in Cuba that may be responsible for hacking your blog. Increasingly, governments who seek to retain their grip, who want to make sure that they are the rulers of the flows of information, are using very, very sophisticated systems to take out entire discussions or words or services to begin with. I mean, there are countries where the governments have already purchased monitoring systems that will allow them to monitor all of the internet traffic in that country, even though there is no viable information structure yet. I mean, some countries do not have bloggers that have taken the opportunity because there simply is no internet yet, while some of these governments have already put in place the filtering net and the monitoring net for the day that there might be a blogger. And so I think we have to challenge censorship also on this level. It's not about whether we here in the Netherlands should allow people to scream there might be a fire or there is a fire in a theater, but there's a much bigger picture to this, which is a global one, where some governments are using the most sophisticated tools, and again, some of these sophisticated tools, these digital weapons, are made in our own societies. And so we have to look beyond our own borders, beyond our own rules and regulations about speech, and look at how what we do here, what kind of tools we allow to produce, end up violating people's human rights all across the world.
But that idea is based on maybe also the hope that if you give people the freedom of information, they're going to use it for more freedom of information. Yoani, in the film there is a demonstration against another demonstration, a man who's going on a hunger strike against the restrictions. And so the other demonstration is against the fact that he's anti-Cuban, if I say that correctly. Do you think that if these people all would have access to internet, that would change their minds? That you and your colleagues could reach them and make them think differently?
La represión, cuando no se visibiliza, cuando no se narra, cuando no se reporta en un video, en un tweet, en Facebook, pues los represores creen que tienen impunidad, ¿no? O sea, la no visibilidad crea una sensación de impunidad, ¿no?
When you don't see images from this repression, when you don't hear about this, then the repressors, they are going to think that they have immunity, that they can do whatever they want.
De manera que creo, si Cuba se abriera a internet, si cada ciudadano pudiera tener una conexión en su casa, escribir un blog, tener una cuenta de Twitter, los represores tendrían más cuidado. Esos rostros que en el filme aparecen atacando, gritando, insultando, tendrían más cuidado, porque sabrían que cada acción que hagan podría estar inmediatamente conocida por sus compatriotas y por el mundo.
I think that if everybody has access to internet, then they would see all these images, and then the government would be more careful on this, and all this repression would be on the screen, so everybody would see it. So it's like a protection.
Can I go to Petra now? Because that was one of the ideas of WikiLeaks as well.
Yes, well, actually, I was about to jump in. One of the interesting things is, my film was made at the time that the Arab Spring was looking more positive than it does now. And that was at the time when people got control of information for the first time in their societies. And very positive things happened. And sure, things are not as good now, but at least the people are making the decisions for themselves. At least those decisions aren't in the hands of unanswerable autocrats. So it is not, to use your example, that you can convince somebody else of the justice of your argument. It is that you are at least able to have the argument that is so important. And so long as there is control of information in the society, there can be no argument. And sure, good or bad may ensue as a consequence, but at least there is discussion. So yes, I think the original aim of WikiLeaks are laudable. And I don't, that is part of the tragedy of what happened to it.
Hay un filme alemán muy conocido que se llama La vida de los otros. Y en ese filme es precisamente la historia de una conversión. Del hombre que escucha en la línea telefónica, detrás de la pared, y poco a poco él, en el interior de él ocurre un proceso de conversión. Cada vez que yo escribo un post en mi blog, envío un tweet, hablo con mi esposo en mi habitación y sé que están escuchando. Cada vez que hago eso, trato de convencer al que escucha, lee, monitoriza mi vida al otro lado.
There is a German film that's called Das Leben der Anderen, and there we see this man who listens to the life of someone else, but then he's going to change. There's a change in him. In the case in Cuba, well, when I'm writing blogs and posting in Twitter, I really want that with this post, the people that are listening, superficially listening to it, they are also going to change.
There's so much more we could talk about, and I really would love to do that, but we're getting to the end, and I want to ask Yvette to give us a presentation of one of the tools you have made at Witness, the Obscura Cam. Do you want to stay seated, or do you want to...
Yeah, no, I can stay seated, and I have to say, given the people here on the panel, we'll keep it really, really brief, but the lives of others is something that we think about quite a lot. Right now there's legislation pending in the US that gives the government the right to anything people post on Facebook or anywhere else. So at least I live in America, they're already listening to all of my conversations. Now for me it's less dangerous. If you live in a different kind of country, it's quite dangerous. And I think all of your mobile phone, Vodafone gives all the information to everybody during the revolution. The government asked Vodafone to just turn everything off, and they did. They shut down with a few little clicks all the internet providers and all the mobile phones. So before we think this only happens in very repressive regimes on the other side of the world, this is actually happening right now under our nose. But anyway, so one of the things we do, we support people who actually are much braver than we are, and help them think about this. So maybe we can just quickly click through this, and people all over the world who are filming this sea around them. So to some degree it's a very hopeful moment, right? Like millions of people are turning to video and have the devices in their hands to hold people accountable. And there are the platforms now to really share information and share stories with each other. We can click to the next slide. So when we train people and when we deal with different networks, and they may be bloggers in Iran or they may be Syrian activists that we work with a lot at the moment, these are the questions that they ask us. How do I stay safe when I'm in a demonstration with my mobile phone? How do I tell this story so it actually can be evidence? Some other members of my team right now are in The Hague at the International Criminal Court. They're getting flooded with citizen videos, and the court does not know how to review that to hold people who are committing these crimes actually accountable. But also, how do I prove that my story is actually true? So that's one of the biggest challenges with the advent of all this filming. People will still be denied, and the Syrian regime will simply say, oh, that didn't happen in Syria, that's not true. So we can go to the next slide. So we designed, together with an amazing mobile developer group called the Guardian Project, we designed an app that we call InformaCam. And what it does is when you all film something, if you have an iPhone, it actually records much more than the image. It tells you as geosensors, it tells you where your image is, it tells you what devices are around you, it has a compass. So that can be very dangerous if you are in Iran. But it can also be really amazing information. So what this app does, it locks all that information in. So your video, as I like to say, gets superpowers. It shows when, where, and what, and then it can be used much better as evidence. So we would like to think of a world where you can go into a witnessing mode. Imagine filming something in Syria, and you push a button and it goes to the International Criminal Court, and there's a clean chain of custody, and no one can deny that that's the crime that happened then and there. And we've been talking about with Google and YouTube who are to incorporate some of that functionality. So the other key threat is privacy, security. They are in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but all these technology companies are moving at light speed, and some of these essential human rights are just not being represented in these platforms. So Facebook is the new public square of activism, so there's a real responsibility that when people are using those platforms to communicate with each other, that it's done in a way that protects people's essentials and dignity and privacy. So this is an example from Iran, which you might recognize, where the Iranian government started tracking down everybody who was protesting. How many of you have seen the Neda video, the girl in Iran who was shot on the street when she was protesting? How many of you actually forwarded that video to someone else and say, wow, look at this, right? So the people who were in that video standing next to her, helping her, have all been arrested and tracked down by the Iranian government. So it is a fantastic thing that we can share this, that these crimes no longer get, they're no longer buried. But when we are all participating in this process, we also have to think about the risks and what happens when we all become participants in that. So what we did, if you go one slide back, we actually created another app which is called ObscuraCam, and it allows you to, when you film something, it allows you to blur somebody's face. So if you want to speak out because you feel that, the more famous you are, the least likely it is that the government will come after you, that's okay, but there may be people in the background behind you. Now, that's just one little app that, we give to activists when they're in Syria or in other places. But we've also recently launched a human rights channel on YouTube, and we've convinced YouTube to create a face blurring functionality in their video editor so that everybody who uploads a video to YouTube, which I think there's 80 hours of video being uploaded per minute today, has the ability to, if they want to actually blur somebody's face. So to think about the other aspects of these amazing platforms that we're all using.
And can you integrate that with the Google Glasses?
Well, actually, the Google Glasses, interestingly, we were talking to them. It's called Project X. They're much too conspicuous. They're so ugly. And so if you walk around with Google Glasses, if you're in the wrong regime, you will be found out very, very quickly. So you need a much smaller, we've done that in Afghanistan, it's much smaller little cameras.
But you could have an app on the Google Glasses in a few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do record everything that someone sees, but in fact, we just gotta, speaking of the stories that are actually, there's still so many places in the world where there are human rights abuses happening, and these stories are never actually told, and nobody will ever see them. We just got a request. We've been working in Zimbabwe for quite a long time, and in June there's a referendum And as you all know, Mugabe is really running a terrible regime which is called the fear. And we were asked to work with hidden cameras, and we talked because we don't make that decision. The people on the ground actually make that decision. We support them, and they said it is so dangerous right now that anybody who would be caught with hidden camera or anyone who actually sees filming is basically going to die. So, on the advice of our local partners, who are very brave grassroots activists, we decided not to do this. So there are still countries in the world where, despite the internet and despite everything else, people are being intimidated and repressed, and it takes very, very brave people like Yoani and other people to actually continue to stand up against such people.
Couldn't agree more. I'm so sorry that we have to make it into this discussion. There is one good side to it, that there are Cuba Libres at the bar for €1.50. Sorry? Oh, jawel, maar we zijn... Can we do some questions?
May I introduce something with censorship in China? I speak so...
Yes.
I want to say
and then
small...
we'll come to your question.
Because I'm not just a joke, I'm also very technical, so I know censorship in China. I fight for transparency, for censorship for a long time. I support a lot of people fighting for transparency. So in China, even China is different from other countries because a lot of tools, useful tools, for example, YouTube, Twitter, all of our tools, our message platform was blocked. So this is very difficult. So in China, there are a lot of same platforms. For example, Xinjiang Weibo is a clone of Twitter, and there are Ren is a clone of Facebook. But
how's it called? The clone of Facebook?
Ren.com. Lots of students using this platform, and if you post some sensitive message, will be
will be censored in front of in advance of posting.
So, lots of content was disappeared. Even you didn't not post it. Nobody received this message. So, lots of people have to using the foreign company tools. For example, how to using Twitter, Google Plus, and Facebook.
And you use specific tools to be able to use the Twitters and the Facebooks and the others.
My friends are very technical, so we are using such tools to bypass GW. So in practical life, there are famous pictures. I'm jumping on the Great Wall. You know, there are another system called is a Great Firewall. Is a censorship system of internet. So jump on the firewall means bypass GW. It's very meaningful. So a lot of people have to get information freely. So
can you name some of the means you use to bypass that?
Close the wall. Bypass, there are a lot of tools to help us bypass. You know, there are our software name is FreeGate. Maybe it's very famous because a lot of Chinese and Aryan people using these tools. And recently, Tor was blocked in China, but a lot of people rent another service, VPS, building a VPS server, and also a lot of people using VPN to bypass GW.
So tools like VPN and Tor are used a lot to bypass the Great Firewall. From Cuba as well?
Communist country.
Johnny, want to ask something?
Una pequeña cosa. Mirando el proyecto de las cámaras, los rostros ocultos, en Cuba se está dando un proceso similar pero contrario. Como los activistas ya son muy conocidos por la policía y muy poco ciudadano común se atreve a expresarse, el tema de que te reconozcan o no es un problema.
Well, as I see these images from this, in Cuba is happening something the other way around. In Cuba, there are some other ways to recognize the people.
Pero en algunos videos sobre momentos de represión están quedando grabadas las caras de los represores.
In some of these films, you can see also the faces from the repressors.
Y hay un proyecto que se llama Repressors ID, Repressor, y es un sitio web donde se ponen esos rostros y cubanos del exilio y cubanos de la isla van completando la información sobre la persona, sobre el represor.
This program that is called Repressor's ID to identify the repressor. So they put all these faces in this website, and all the people they are in exile abroad or in the island. They could recognize the people that they were there.
Es un tema un poco delicado porque puede prestarse a la venganza, pero también un llamado de alerta a las personas que reprimen para decirles: no hay amnesia, no hay olvido, tu rostro queda y sabemos quién eres.
And also be dangerous because there's a high factor of vengeance. But on the other side, it's also a warning to the oppressors to say, now you have to be more careful with this.
We're not forgetting. Looking at Mateo, we have to...
I think we have to round it out. Yeah, round it out.
There was one lady who really wants to ask a question. Shall we do one?
This last one. Yoani, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo tú te sientes aquí? How do you feel here? Are you feeling sad when you hear all these stories about the technical stuff? I live in Cuba 3 months a year, so I know your country very well. But I can imagine that you don't feel so well being here the first time out of your own country. And hearing all this, very specialized talk about technical stuff, while in the meantime in Cuba there is no shit and nobody can go to the internet, nobody reads your blog there. I mean, people think that, but it's not true. How?
Bueno, es una sensación contradictoria, ¿no? Por un lado, me siento que estoy viajando en el tiempo a las dificultades que tendremos en el futuro. Pero por otro, creo que esto es contagioso. Ellos me contagian con el virus de la tecnología y cuando yo regrese a Cuba contagiaré a otros.
This is a contradictory feeling because at the one side I see that all this conversation here, all the things that I hear, is going to be something that's going to happen within years in Cuba. But on the other side, she gets contagious with this, and she hopefully would also use this virus this virus technology to get also this contagious in Cuba.
The good guy with the virus, I guess. I'm sorry, I see there are more questions, but we really have to run it up. So I want to thank all the speakers, all the guests. Patrick, Marietje, Yvette, Zola, Yoani, Farnas, thank you so much for coming too. Give them a big applause, please. So as I said, there are Cuba Libres at the bar for 150, and there is music from our men from Odessa after this. Thank you so much. Bye.